Dead America, Tales from Las Vegas, The Desperation by Derek Slayton. Chapter 1. Melvin flew the transport helicopter over the outskirts of northwestern Las Vegas, the late morning sun hanging high in the sky. Below him, the streets stretched out in a grid pattern, some roads choked with abandoned vehicles, while others lay eerily empty. His eyes scanned the landscape with practiced familiarity, having flown this route dozens of times over the past week. The city looked different from up here, quieter somehow, though he knew better than to trust that impression. Massive hordes still roamed the streets in certain areas, dark clusters of movement that shifted and flowed like living shadows. But there were gaps now, entire blocks where the creatures had been drawn away. It was progress, slow and hard-won, but progress nonetheless. The last week had been a busy one for Melvin. Run after run, he had piloted out to retrieve the brave souls who climbed behind the wheel of the party buses. Those gaudy vehicles had become the lifeline of the operation, luring tens of thousands of ghouls away from the populated areas and into the empty desert. It was working, even if the results came slower than anyone would have liked. Melvin adjusted his grip on the controls, banking slightly to get a better view of a particularly clear section of road. The helicopter responded smoothly, the familiar vibration of the engine, a constant presence beneath him. He found himself lost in the view for a moment, cataloging the changes, noting which areas had been cleared and which remained thick with the dead. His radio headset crackled to life, breaking his concentration. Is it just me, or does it look like we're finally putting a dent into their numbers? Private Parker asked. Melvin glanced back through the cockpit, catching a glimpse of Parker in the rear of the chopper. The soldier sat with a couple of civilians, all of them fresh from a run that had stretched through the night. Parker's face showed the exhaustion that came with that kind of work, but his voice carried curiosity. "I think it depends on where you look," Melvin said. He motioned to the right with one hand, keeping the other steady on the controls. Parker leaned toward the window, following the gesture. The view in that direction told a different story. The roads near the strip were completely clogged, a mass of creatures so dense it looked like a solid wall from this height. Parker let out a sigh that carried clearly through the radio. "Well, that just brought me down," Parker said. Melvin felt a twinge of sympathy. It was easy to get discouraged when faced with numbers like that. He adjusted his course, turning more to the north. The helicopter banked smoothly, offering Parker a different perspective. This section showed the fruits of their labor, streets that were mostly empty save for the occasional wandering ghoul. Parker's mood visibly lifted, his posture straightening in his seat. "Thanks, Melvin. I needed that," Parker said. "Just doing my part, man," Melvin said. Before they could continue their conversation, Melvin noticed his radio blinking. Another channel was trying to make contact. He reached out and switched it over, the frequency changing with a soft click. "What's up, Nellis?" Melvin asked. "How close are you to base?" Captain Foster asked. The captain's voice came through clear and direct, the kind of tone that suggested something was happening. Melvin did a quick calculation in his head, factoring in wind speed and their current position. 10 minutes, give or take," Melvin said. "Okay, when you land I want you and Parker to hightail it over to the command center," Foster said. "You got it, Captain," Melvin said. He clicked his radio back over to the chopper frequency, reconnecting with Parker and the others in the passenger compartment. "Hey Parker, the captain just called. Something's up," Melvin said. "Well, that's not ominous at all," Parker said. The men fell quiet after that. Melvin focused on piloting the helicopter back toward Nellis, his hands moving across the controls with the ease of repetition. The base came into view gradually, its structures growing clearer as they approached. He lined up his approach, bringing the helicopter down smoothly onto the airstrip. The skids touched concrete with barely a bump, and he began the process of powering down the engine. As the rotors slowed their rotation, Melvin caught sight of movement near the edge of the airstrip. A golf cart was driving toward them, moving at a decent clip across the tarmac. "Hey Parker, I think that's our ride," Melvin said. The two men climbed out of the helicopter, the rotor wash still strong enough to tug at their clothes. Melvin nodded to the two civilians who had been riding along with them, watching as they headed toward the barracks. Those two had earned their rest after the night they had had. He and Parker approached the golf cart, the civilian driver waving them over with an urgent gesture. "Come on, the captain is waiting for you," the driver said. Parker and Melvin hopped into the golf cart without hesitation. The vehicle lurched forward, picking up speed as it crossed the base. The driver navigated between buildings with the confidence of someone who had made this trip many times before. They covered the distance quickly, the cart coming to a stop in front of the command center. The building looked no different from any of the others on base, functional and military in its design. Melvin and Parker climbed out of the cart and headed inside. As soon as they entered, they could hear a voice coming through a speakerphone somewhere deeper in the building. The sound echoed slightly in the hallway, making it difficult to make out individual words. They followed the sound into a small meeting room. Captain Foster stood at the head of the table, with Sergeant Hanson, Private Thomas, and Private Carver positioned around it. Each man had a notebook in front of them, and they were all writing as the voice from the speaker continued. The atmosphere in the room was focused, everyone paying close attention to what was being said. Melvin recognized the voice coming through the speaker. Midnight Mike, the radio host who had become an unexpected ally in their efforts to coordinate survivors across the city. Okay, that should wrap up Sector 17. Just to the west of that, in Sector 18, there's another 35 people. In that group, there's... Mike said. Hold up, Mike. Our stragglers finally showed up, Foster said. He looked up from his notebook, acknowledging Melvin and Parker with a nod. The two men moved further into the room, finding spots to stand near the table. Sorry we're late, I guess, but it's not like we were sleeping in, Parker said. Did you get any sleep last night? Hanson asked. The sergeant's question carried a hint of concern. He knew what those overnight runs took out of a person. A couple of hours while we crept down the road. Not the best of sleep, though, because every time a song I recognized came on, I'd wake up, Parker said. A few of the men around the table let out quiet chuckles. The party buses had a habit of playing the most inconvenient music at the worst possible times. Are you good to go today, Parker? Foster asked. That depends. What are we doing? Parker asked. Foster gestured toward the speakerphone on the table. Mike, do you want to lay it out for the newcomers? Foster said. Welcome to the party, gentlemen, Mike said. His voice came through the speaker with remarkable clarity, as if he were standing in the room with them, rather than broadcasting from his studio. In a nutshell, you're doing great work clearing out the streets of those things. Based on what I'm seeing on the traffic cameras, you've gotten a couple 100,000 of those things out of the city. The problem is, it's not going fast enough, Mike said. Parker's expression shifted, something defensive crossing his features. Melvin could understand the reaction. They had all been working themselves to exhaustion. I think I've slept for 8 hours this week, Mike. We're doing this as fast as humanly possible, Parker said. Mike's tone changed, becoming apologetic almost before Parker had finished speaking. Oh, no, please don't think I'm criticizing you, Parker. Far from it. My ass is sitting in a cushy studio, so I'm the last person who is going to complain. But the reality is, I'm in a much better position than a lot of my listening audience, Mike said. What do you mean? Parker asked. I mean, I've had a significant increase in calls over the last few days of people telling me that they're running out of food, or that they already have. And at the rate you guys are escorting the zombies out of town, they're going to starve before the job is done. People are getting desperate, Mike said. The room went quiet for a moment. The weight of that statement settled over everyone present. They had known there were survivors scattered throughout the city, but hearing it laid out so plainly made the situation more real. Which means we need to adjust our mission, at least temporarily, Foster said. So, what are we doing? Parker asked. I have a long list of people who are capable of fighting, but they lack the resources to fight back in a meaningful way. You can only get so far with a baseball bat, Mike said. Well, unless you found a stash of guns, I'm not sure what we can do about it, Parker said. Well, lucky for you, I've been working my magic on Gus, Mike said. There was a note of satisfaction in his voice, the sound of someone who had just played a winning hand. Who the hell is Gus? Parker asked. He's the owner of the biggest gun shop in West Vegas, Mike said. Recognition dawned on Parker's face. Melvin saw it happen, the moment when the pieces clicked into place. Big Gus's House of Guns? Parker asked. The very same, Mike said. I thought that place was locked up tight, Parker asked. It is, and Gus has been inside this whole time, Mike said. Melvin had heard of the place, though he'd never been inside. It had a reputation, the kind of establishment that took its security seriously even before the world ended. I'm not sure if you ever met the man, but he's a bit eccentric, Mike said. Hanson let out a sound that was half laugh, half snort. Which is to say, he's batshit crazy, Hansen said. Then he'll fit right in with us, Parker said. A few of the men around the table smiled at that. It wasn't wrong. The situation they found themselves in required a certain flexibility of mind. And I've managed to convince him of that. He's willing to open up his arsenal to help people, but he wants to meet the man in charge before doing so, Mike said. Which means we get to take a field trip over to his place, Foster said. And then what? Melvin asked. He had been following the conversation closely, but the end point wasn't entirely clear to him yet. Thomas held up his notebook, the pages filled with neat handwriting. We start distributing them to people capable of fighting, Thomas said. Basically the same thing we've been doing in the South, just with a better armed force, Hansen said. And a priority list of people who are starving, Mike said. Sounds like we have a full day ahead of us, Parker said. Foster looked at him for a long moment, seeming to weigh something in his mind. If you want to hang back and get some rest, Parker, I'm not opposed to it, Foster said. And miss out on doing some private shopping at Big Gus's House of Guns? Are you crazy? Parker asked. Foster let out a laugh, the sound breaking some of the tension in the room. He nodded at Parker's enthusiasm, clearly not surprised by the response. All right, Mike, give Gus a call and let him know that we're headed his way. Chapter 2. Sergeant Hansen sat behind the wheel of a reinforced party bus, his hands resting comfortably on the oversized steering wheel. The vehicle handled differently than the standard military transport he was used to, but after a week of driving these things through zombie-filled streets, he had gotten the hang of it. Unlike their trips to lure ghouls out of the city, the music and lights were cut off. The silence inside the bus felt strange after so many runs with disco and pop music blaring at full volume. In the back, Captain Foster, Private Carver, and Private Thomas lounged on the garish seating. The plush benches that had once been designed for partygoers now served as makeshift military transport, a surreal combination that never quite stopped being absurd. The three men were chuckling at Private Parker, who was passed out on an overstuffed bench at the very back of the bus. His head was tilted at an angle that looked uncomfortable, and his mouth hung slightly open. How mad do you think he'll be if we don't wake him up when we get to Gus's? Thomas asked. He kept his voice low, not quite a whisper, but quiet enough that it wouldn't disturb Parker. Carver leaned forward slightly, clearly entertained by the suggestion. I doubt it will come to that, Foster said. What makes you say that, Cap? Carver asked. Because his ass is getting woken up the moment he starts snoring. I don't know what's wrong with that boy, but he sounds like a table saw cutting through an anvil once he gets going, Foster said. Thomas and Carver let out a chuckle at that description. It wasn't far from the truth. Parker's snoring had a quality to it that defied nature, somehow managing to be both loud and grating at the same time. The interior speakers crackled to life, Hansen's voice coming through the microphone mounted on the dash. Hey Cap, you might want to check this out, Hansen said. Foster and Thomas pushed themselves up from their seats and walked up to the front of the bus. They positioned themselves behind Hansen, looking out through the front windshield. The bus was approaching the west side of town now, the buildings becoming more commercial in nature. What am I looking at, Sarge? Foster asked. Hansen gestured toward the streets with one hand, keeping the other on the wheel. The movement was casual, almost relaxed. Just look at this. I've seen heavier traffic on a Sunday morning, Hansen said. Foster, Carver, and Thomas took in the sight before them. The streets were mostly empty, a stark contrast to what they had seen in other parts of the city. While there were still zombies roaming around, they appeared in small numbers, no groups bigger than 3, and those packs were spread out across multiple blocks. Only a few of them took notice of the bus as it rolled by, their heads turning to track the movement, but they quickly lost interest as Hansen made the turn at the next intersection, the creatures going back to their aimless wandering. Hansen rode up another block before applying the brakes. The bus slowed to a stop, and he looked down the street ahead. The others joined him in staring, their expressions shifting as they processed what they were seeing. What in the hell? Thomas asked. Move us up slowly, Sarge, Foster said. Hansen nodded and gently pressed down on the gas. The bus crawled forward, moving at a walking pace down the road. 2 blocks up on the corner lot sat the gun store, but that wasn't what concerned the soldiers. Dozens of bodies littered the road, each one sporting a catastrophic head wound. Brains and bone fragments decorated the pavement in gruesome patterns. As they got closer, the building itself came into view. It was a 2-story monstrosity that embraced the excess Las Vegas was known for. Hundreds of multicolored lights covered the side of the building, sitting powered off at the moment. Even in the daylight, it was clear that at night, the sign was bright enough that it could be seen from space. The sheer scale of it was impressive, bordering on absurd. "You gotta love the subtlety," Thomas said. "Sarge, drive us up nice and slow. We don't want to spook him," Foster said. "Copy that, Cap," Hansen said. The bus bounced around a bit as Hansen drove it over the corpses littering the ground in the parking lot. The suspension handled it well enough, though the impacts were still noticeable. It took a moment for them to reach the front of the building, navigating around the worst of the carnage. As they approached, movement caught their attention. A lone figure was emerging on the roof of the gun store, walking to the edge with casual confidence. "I'm guessing that's Gus," Hansen said. "You boys stay here. I'll go introduce myself," Foster said. The men nodded as Foster made his way down the aisle of the bus. He descended the steps and stepped out into the parking lot, his boots crunching on scattered debris. He looked up, spotting the man standing at the edge of the roof. Even from 2 stories away, he could see that the man was easily in his 50s. His head was mostly bald, with what hair he had left pulled back into a ponytail. He wore what looked like a tactical vest over a faded shirt, and he held an assault rifle with the ease of long familiarity. "Hello down there," Gus called out. His voice carried well, projecting down without needing to shout. There was an easy quality to it, the tone of someone completely at ease with their situation. "Hello up there, I'm Captain Foster," Foster said. "I figured as much. I haven't had many customers of late, even though everybody knows I run my blowout sale this time of year," Gus said. Foster let out a chuckle before motioning to the scores of dead scattered across the parking lot and street. The bodies formed an irregular pattern, concentrated more heavily near the entrance but spread out toward the perimeter. "I know times are tough, but I do appreciate your next-level marketing, though," Foster said. Gus gave him a curious look from his perch on the roof, clearly unsure of what he meant. His head tilted slightly to one side, waiting for clarification. After a moment, Foster continued. "I mean, what better way to advertise a blowout sale than blowing out the backs of zombie heads?" Foster asked. Gus stared at him seriously for a few moments, his expression unreadable. Then his face broke into a fit of laughter. The sound echoed off the surrounding buildings, genuine and unrestrained. "Yeah, Mike said that we'd get along. Give me a second and I'll be right down," Gus said. He vanished from view, presumably heading toward a stairwell inside. Foster smacked the side of the bus with his palm, the metallic thud clearly audible inside. The signal brought the other 3 men out, Parker included. The private looked slightly disheveled, his hair sticking up in odd directions and his eyes still heavy with sleep. A moment later, the front door of the store opened up, revealing Gus. Up close, he looked exactly as he had from the street, though Foster could now see the lines around his eyes and the weathered quality of his skin. This was a man who had seen his share of years and wasn't particularly concerned about hiding it. "Well, come on in," Gus said. Foster walked right up to him, extending his hand for a shake. Gus accepted it, his grip firm and steady. "It's nice to meet you, Gus," Foster said. "Likewise, Captain. And who are your friends here?" Gus asked. "This is Hansen, Carver, and Thomas," Foster said. He gestured to each man in turn. Parker opened his mouth as if to correct the introduction, then seemed to think better of it and stayed quiet. "It's good to finally meet you boys. Mike wouldn't shut up about you and what you're doing out there," Gus said. "We're just doing our part," Hansen said. "If even half of what Mike was telling me is true, you're doing a lot more than that. I tell you what, just to show you how appreciative I am of what you're doing, why don't you boys have a look around while I have a chat with your captain here? Pick yourself out something nice, any gun you want, on the house. I'll even throw in a couple boxes of ammo too," Gus said. The 3 soldiers' eyes went wide as they looked around the expansive store. Every wall had racks of firearms behind it. Everything from standard sidearms and shotguns to heavier-powered assault rifles. There were even some more exotic historical weapons displayed in glass cases, polished and maintained despite their age. "Good Lord, is that a blunderbuss?" Parker asked. His voice carried awe as he spotted the antique weapon mounted on the far wall. The wide barrel was unmistakable even from a distance. "I only have a few shots for that one, but if you're real nice, I'll let you take it out for a spin. Now go shop. I need to have some words with your captain," Gus said. Foster nodded to the men, letting them know it was acceptable for them to go shopping. The three soldiers scattered into different sections of the store, their attention immediately captured by the available hardware. As soon as they were out of earshot, Gus started talking. His tone shifted, becoming more businesslike. "All right, Foster, let me lay it out for you," Gus said. "By all means," Foster said. "As I'm sure you can probably tell, I've been quite content to ride this thing out in my own personal bunker. But Mike convinced me to give you boys a chance, back your play and whatnot," Gus said. "And that's appreciated, more than you know," Foster said. Gus put up a hand, the gesture cutting Foster off, before he could continue down that line of thought. "Save the platitudes, my ass is for sitting, not kissing. Now, here's what I'm going to offer you. I have a care package set up and ready to go for you. It's enough weaponry and MREs to set up a squad of 4 for a week. While you go deliver that, I'm going to get 5 more care packages set up. If you can make some progress with what I hand out, I'll be inclined to make a few more for you," Gus said. "That's generous of you, Gus," Foster said. "You might think twice once I tell you what my price is," Gus said. Foster paused, his expression remaining neutral. He nodded for Gus to continue, already preparing himself for whatever demand might be coming. "If your crazy-ass plan happens to succeed, and Las Vegas once again becomes a desert oasis, I want a spot down in Lake Las Vegas to call my own. And a set tea time," Gus said. Foster blinked, processing that for a moment. Of all the things he had expected, a request for golf club membership hadn't been on the list. "I'm sure we can arrange something. I know the new head of security down there, so we'll get something nice for you. But if I'm being honest, you didn't really strike me as the golfing type," Foster said. "I'm old and broken, Captain, and golf is about the only exercise my body will let me do. It's either that or water aerobics, and quite frankly, I'll be dead before I put on a pair of Speedos and jump in the pool," Gus said. Foster let out a bit of a laugh, nodding in understanding. The mental image that conjured was not a pleasant one. "Right there with you, Gus. I think we have a deal," Foster said. Gus extended his hand, shaking the captain's to seal the agreement. "All right, Foster, I'll get that care package set up by the door for you. In the meantime, go find yourself something nice. I think you're going to need it today." Chapter 3. Hansen drove the group southeast, navigating the party bus through streets that were growing increasingly populated with the dead. The movement was steady, not overwhelming, just a couple dozen zombies scattered across the next few blocks. It was a far cry from the thin population they had seen around the gun store. He kept his speed moderate, watching the creatures turn their heads as the bus passed. Most of them showed interest, but couldn't keep pace with the vehicle. The GPS mounted on the dash guided him forward, the digital voice occasionally announcing turns in a calm, mechanical tone. Hansen followed the directions, making the turn at the next intersection. As soon as he completed the maneuver, he was forced to slam on the brakes. The bus jerked to a sudden stop, throwing everyone slightly forward. A crowd of 50 zombies was scattered along the next block, filling the road ahead. "Hey, Cap, we got a problem," Hansen called out. Foster walked up to the front of the bus, moving past the seats with the easy balance of someone who had spent plenty of time on moving vehicles. He looked out through the windshield to see what the sergeant was looking at. His eyes took in the concentration of ghouls ahead, then dropped down to the GPS. They were only a quarter mile from their destination. "What's the problem, Hansen?" Foster asked. The sergeant let out a sigh, gesturing toward the creatures in the road ahead. Some of them had noticed the bus and were starting to shuffle in their direction. "If we push through them, we'll be leading them right to the people we're supposed to be rescuing," Hansen said. Foster was quiet for a moment, considering the situation. His eyes tracked across the crowd, calculating numbers and distances. If this plan is going to work, they're going to have to be fighters. So, we'll know real quick if this is going to fly or not, Foster said. Hansen thought about it for a moment. The logic was sound, even if it meant putting civilians in immediate danger. He shrugged and nodded his agreement. "Yeah, that's fair. Hang on because it's going to be bumpy," Hansen said. Foster clapped his hand on Hansen's shoulder before retreating into the back of the bus. The captain moved down the aisle, grabbing onto seats for support as Hansen hit the gas. The bus picked up speed as they approached the front edge of the zombie crowd. The first impact came seconds later, a solid thump as the reinforced bumper connected with a ghoul, then another and another. Everybody jostled around from the impacts, but the vehicle barely slowed down. The modifications that had been made to these buses were holding up perfectly. Bodies tumbled to the sides or went under the wheels, the protective shielding doing its job of pushing them away rather than jamming up the undercarriage. Hansen kept his grip firm on the wheel, maintaining their course through the press of bodies. The sergeant made the turn a couple blocks up, muttering curses under his breath as he saw a few dozen zombies spread out over a handful of yards. These weren't part of the crowd they had just plowed through. These were new ones, positioned directly between them and their objective. He glanced up at the GPS, seeing that their target house was a block up on the left. "All right, boys, we got a fight on our hands," Hansen said. He glanced over his shoulder, watching Foster, Parker, Thomas, and Carver walking up. Each man was holding one of the shiny new assault rifles they had picked out at Gus's store. The weapons looked pristine, a stark contrast to the worn gear they had been using. The captain looked out at the situation, his eyes scanning the layout of the street and the position of the zombies. Then he started issuing orders. "Parker, Carver, you're with me. We're clearing out the target house. Hansen, Thomas, keep watch on the zombies across the street," Foster said. "You don't want us to eliminate them?" Hansen asked. "Only if they get within 5 yards of the road. If we're going to turn these people loose on the city, we need to know if they can handle themselves," Foster said. Hansen nodded, agreeing with the logic. It made sense, even if it felt counterintuitive to leave threats standing. Foster looked back to Carver, pointing to him then, to a pile of 4 canvas bags sitting on one of the seats. The bags were bulging with supplies, packed tight and ready for distribution. "Carver, grab 2 of those," Foster said. Carver did as instructed, slinging the bags over his shoulders with ease. Foster readied his assault rifle, checking the magazine and chambering a round. He moved to take point at the door, his stance shifting into something more aggressive. "We're hot. Let's get this done," Foster said. The men let out a chorus of "Yes, sir," before Hansen pulled the release handle. The door swung open with a hydraulic hiss, letting in the sounds of the street. The low moans of zombies mixed with the ambient noise of the wind. Foster rushed out first, coming around the side of the bus and immediately locking onto his first target. The closest zombie was 10 yards away, its head snapping toward the movement. The captain fired, and the back of its head exploded outward in a spray of dark fluid. The creature dropped like a puppet with cut strings. Within seconds, 2 more gunmen opened fire as Parker and Carver joined the offensive. The trio moved as one, keeping a few feet of separation between themselves as they fired. Their movements were coordinated, each man covering a different sector of the yard. The training showed in how they positioned themselves, how they moved without getting in each other's line of fire. One bullet after another flew, ripping through the skulls of zombies and dropping them to the ground. The noise drew the attention of the half-dozen creatures gathered by the front door of the house. Each of them turned and began shambling toward the soldiers, their movements jerky and uncoordinated. "Make sure the house is out of your fire line," Foster called out. Foster and Parker adjusted course, running up to the front of the house so that their guns were aimed toward the zombies with nothing but open space behind them. The maneuver took only seconds, both men moving with the efficiency that came from experience. Once in position, both men opened fire, putting down the creatures with ruthless efficiency. Each shot found its mark, the zombies collapsing one after another. As quickly as the assault had begun, it was over. Foster scanned the yard, spotting a couple dozen corpses laying motionless on the ground and driveway. He glanced over to the front of the bus, where Hansen and Thomas stood guard. Both men had their rifles up and ready, watching the street carefully. The noise from their firefight had drawn the attention of the couple dozen zombies across the street. The creatures were spread out over 3 houses, but they were starting to converge toward the sound of gunfire. They were still a ways away from the road, however, giving them time to work. Foster led Parker and Carver up to the front door. As they approached, the door began opening from the inside. Standing in the front room was a younger duo, both of them looking like they were barely out of high school. The boy was short and stocky, with brown hair that hung over his forehead. The girl was slightly taller, with her blonde hair pulled back into a ponytail. Both of them looked exhausted, with dark circles under their eyes and a weariness that went beyond physical fatigue. "Oh, come on, Mike. Are you serious right now?" Foster asked. His disappointment was evident in his tone, the words coming out before he could stop them. The duo picked up on it, their expressions shifting from relief to something more defensive. "Yeah, I get it. We're not exactly what you expected," Edwin said. "But that doesn't give you a reason to be rude," Kaylee said. Foster let out a deep sigh, nodding. He knew they were right. He had let his expectations get ahead of him, and that wasn't fair to these kids. Yeah, sorry. Mike said there were some fighters here, Foster said. And he was right, Edwin said. Edwin and Kaylee took a step back, motioning for the captain to look into the house. Foster stepped through the doorway, his eyes adjusting to the dimmer interior. He audibly gasped when he saw half a dozen corpses stacked up in the corner of the living room. The bodies were arranged with care, moved out of the way to create space in the room. There's another 8 out back, Kaylee said, and 20 or so more stretching back a couple of blocks, Edwin said. Including our parents, Kaylee said. Her voice trembled as she revealed that fact, the words catching slightly in her throat. But she quickly shook it off, her jaw setting with determination. Foster straightened up, his entire demeanor changing. He spoke with conviction, his tone respectful. You have my apologies. I'm Captain Foster. This is Parker and Carver, Foster said. I'm Edwin. This is my sister Kaylee, Edwin said. His sister nodded to the captain, acknowledging the introduction. So, how did you end up here? Foster asked. Long story short is that we were trying to get to one of our friends' houses. They were out of food, and we figured that we could help, Kaylee said. This wasn't their house, was it? Parker asked. The siblings both shook their heads. They're across the street, Edwin said. Why did you stop here then? Parker asked. Well, in addition to running out of ammo, Edwin said. He let out a sigh as he pulled up his pants leg, revealing a bandage wrapped around his ankle. The material was stained but relatively clean, suggesting they had changed it recently. The soldiers' eyes went wide as fear gripped them. Parker and Carver both took an involuntary step back, their hands tightening on their weapons. But Kaylee immediately stepped in, her hands coming up in a calming gesture. Relax, he wasn't bitten, Kaylee said. I just twisted the hell out of it while fighting a couple doors down. We managed to get in here and clear it before I couldn't put pressure on it anymore, Edwin said. That was 2 days ago, Kaylee said. And by the time I was able to move again, there were too many of those things out front for us to deal with, Edwin said. And by then, I was able to get a hold of Midnight Mike, Kaylee said. So why risk it if the cavalry was riding in? Foster said. Exactly, Edwin said. Before the conversation could continue, gunshots popped off from outside. The sharp cracks echoed off the surrounding houses. Foster glanced outside, looking at Hanson and Thomas taking out a few zombies that had gotten too close to the bus. The sergeant was motioning frantically to the captain, making hand gestures to show that more zombies were coming down the road. It was the pack that had been following them from when they pushed through the crowd. Carver, give our new friends here their gifts, Foster said. The private handed over the canvas bags he had been carrying. The siblings opened them up, their hands moving quickly. Their eyes went wide at the sight of the weapons inside. Each bag had a handgun and assault rifle, with plenty of ammunition for each weapon. Magazines were loaded and ready, with boxes of additional rounds packed in alongside. Okay, did Mike tell you why we're here? Foster asked. Yeah, he said that you needed people who could help others to safety, Kaylee asked. That's right, and you said you could, Foster said. Damn right we did, Edwin said. Well, time for a little trial by fire. You have the ones across the street coming your way, and another 40 a couple blocks away. Show us what you can do. Chapter 4. Edwin and Kaylee marched outside as they affixed their holstered sidearms to their waists. The movements were smooth and confident, the kind that came from repetition. Once the pistols were secure, they readied their assault rifles. Both of them checked the magazines, chambered rounds, and adjusted their grips with the ease of people who had handled weapons many times before. The display impressed and confused the soldiers watching them. Where in the world did you learn your way around those? Carver asked. Our dad is... Kaylee said. She trailed off for a moment, the present tense catching in her throat. She took a breath and corrected herself. Our dad was a gun enthusiast, Kaylee said. He took us shooting every weekend. It was one of the few things we bonded over, Edwin said. Fair enough, Carver said. Foster stepped forward, his rifle held ready, but pointed at the ground. He looked at the siblings with newfound respect. All right, we're here to back you up. Just call it out, Foster said. The siblings nodded before moving out to the road. They took up a position beside Hanson and Thomas, standing shoulder to shoulder with the soldiers. The two men looked a little confused at the teenagers wielding high-powered rifles, but they didn't object. "Sis, take the left, I'll take the right," Edwin said. Kaylee nodded as the two of them raised their rifles. They picked their targets with care, taking a moment to line up their shots. Then they calmly squeezed their triggers. The rifles cracked in rapid succession, each shot finding its mark. In a matter of moments, they put down 10 creatures, their accuracy remarkable. They paused when they ran out of targets within 10 yards, the remaining creatures still making their way from the house over to them. "Well, this wasn't what I expected," Hansen said. "Frankly, Sarge, it's a nice change of pace to have a welcome surprise," Parker said. Hansen let out a chuckle as they watched the siblings continue to work. The duo moved closer to the house, just like the soldiers had done earlier. They kept the structure out of their direct line of fire, positioning themselves at an angle that gave them clean shots. Once in position, they squeezed their triggers, putting down the ghouls one by one. The creatures dropped in sequence, each falling before the next could get within striking distance. "Are we clear?" Edwin asked. "Yeah, I'm good," Kaylee said. Both of them relaxed for a moment, lowering their rifles slightly. They looked back over to the soldiers, checking in for direction. Hansen gave them a thumbs up, acknowledging their performance. However, Foster pointed down the road, his expression serious. As they adjusted their view, they spotted a horde of ghouls a few blocks away. The mass of creatures filled the street, moving in their direction with single-minded purpose. "Kaylee, get them out of the house. I'm going to see what we're dealing with," Edwin said. Kaylee nodded and ran to the front door of the house, her boots pounding against the pavement. She began banging on the front door, calling out to the people inside. Meanwhile, Edwin rushed out to the road, taking up a position by the soldiers. He stared down the street at the approaching horde, his jaw setting. "Jesus, how many of those things did you bring our way?" Edwin asked. "A small fraction of the ones we passed," Foster said. Edwin let out a sigh, nodding in acceptance. He looked around at their surroundings, taking in the layout of the street. There were a handful of cars sitting in the driveways of the nearby houses, untouched since the first day of the apocalypse. Sedans and trucks sat exactly where their owners had parked them, gathering dust. The teenager looked back behind them, seeing that nothing was coming at them from that direction. The road was clear, giving them room to maneuver. He turned back to the mob, his mind working through possibilities. "You said you're here to back my play, right?" Edwin asked. "As long as you don't go off the rails, yeah, we're here to help," Foster said. Edwin's tone changed, assuming control of the group. He pointed to the nearby cars sitting in driveways as he spoke, his voice carrying authority. "Okay, I need those 4 cars brought out here, bumper to bumper, 2 on each side of the middle of the road," Edwin said. "This road isn't big enough for that. They'll be rolling out into the grass," Thomas said. "I want them in a V formation," Edwin said. Thomas looked back to Foster, uncertain if they should follow the teenager's orders. The captain nodded, giving his approval. The soldiers started moving, everybody but Foster, rushing off toward the cars. They readied their rifles to break out the windows so that they could get to the gear shifter to put them into neutral. As they worked to push the cars out into the road, some of the civilians Kaylee pulled from the house rushed over to help. 6 people in various states of exhaustion joined the effort, putting their shoulders into the vehicles. Together they pushed them into position, the cars rolling across the pavement and settling into the V formation Edwin had described. Edwin and Foster stood at the rear of the operation, watching them set up the defenses. The captain observed the teenager with growing interest. "If I didn't know better, I'd swear you've done this before," Foster said. "Before the world fell apart, I played a lot of tower defense games," Edwin said. "Tower defense games?" Foster asked. "Yeah, basically a bunch of enemies walk toward your home base, and you have to do whatever you can to take them down before they can do that," Edwin said. He gestured toward the barricade taking shape in front of them, illustrating his point. "Sometimes, when you don't have overwhelming firepower, you have to get creative, like funneling them into a trap to give you the time to take them out," Edwin said. "Not bad, kid. Not bad at all," Foster said. Edwin let out a bit of a laugh, the sound carrying relief and pride in equal measure. "And to think, my mom always told me that playing video games wouldn't pay off," Edwin said. The captain joined him in a laugh as Kaylee came back over to them. She was breathing hard from the sprint, but looked ready for more. "What's next, Edwin?" Kaylee asked. "We need the bats from the house. While you do that, I'll get everybody in position," Edwin said. Kaylee gave him a thumbs up before smacking the captain on the arm. "Why don't you put those muscles to use and give a lady a hand?" Kaylee said. Foster chuckled as he joined her in running back to the house. As they went, Edwin walked up to the makeshift barricade that was now stretching across the road in a V formation. The cars sat at angles, creating a funnel that would force the zombies into a killing zone. As the last vehicle snapped into place, he looked to Parker. "This looks good, but can you back your bus up and park it right at the tip? A horde that size might be able to push through," Edwin said. Parker glanced over to Hanson, seeking confirmation. The sergeant motioned for him to follow the kid's orders. As Parker ran off toward the bus, Edwin jumped up onto the trunk of one of the sedans. He looked at the soldiers and the half-dozen civilians from the house that had come out to help. Everyone turned their attention to him. "Okay, listen up," Edwin said. He paused to make sure everyone was focused on him. The group went quiet, waiting for instructions. "If you're not military, I want you to take a bat and find a spot on the line. Get on the cars and wait for those things to get here. If you are military, I want you covering the flanks. I'm going to draw those things into our trap, but if there are any stragglers, put them down. Anybody got questions?" Edwin asked. He looked around at the group, meeting eyes with each person. Everybody shook their heads no, understanding their roles. "All right, let's take these suckers down," Edwin said. Foster and Kaylee returned with the bats, carrying an armful each. The civilians took them and got into position, climbing up onto the hoods and trunks of the vehicles. They spread out along the barricade, each person finding a spot with enough room to swing. Edwin turned his attention to the horde, which was nearly 100 strong and less than a block away. The creatures moved as a mass, filling the street from sidewalk to sidewalk. The teenager took aim with his rifle, pulling the trigger. The shot rang out, and the round punched into the chest of the lead creature. The zombie stumbled but kept coming. He wasn't trying to put it down, rather he wanted to make sure it continued leading the horde straight for him. His ploy worked, keeping their focus on him. The creature at the front maintained its course, and the rest of the horde followed. As they got closer, he fired off a few more shots into the leading edge of the crowd. Each shot drew their attention, making sure they continued marching toward him. Within moments, the bulk of the zombie horde walked straight into his trap. They funneled into the V formation, pressing against the cars on both sides. As soon as the creatures began pressing up against the cars, he yelled out, "Crack those skulls!" Edwin called. The civilians began swinging from the safety of the car hoods. The bats gave them the plenty of reach, making contact with heads. The sound of cracking skulls filled the air, a wet, crunching noise that was both satisfying and disturbing. Zombies dropped to the ground as the civilians worked, their bodies piling up against the barricade. The work was methodical. Swing, kill, wait for the next one to step up. Occasionally a gunshot would pop off at the outer edges of the barricade, a soldier making sure the ghouls didn't flank them. When one shot would go off, Edwin would fire twice, doing his best to keep the zombies' attention on him in the middle. The strategy worked, the creatures fixating on the source of the gunfire and pushing into the funnel. It was an exhausting 15 minutes of work to clear out the horde. The civilians' arms burned from the constant swinging, and sweat dripped down their faces despite the cool air. But eventually, most of the ghouls were laying dead in the middle of the street. There were a few stragglers who were caught up on the bodies of the dead, constantly tripping and falling over in their pursuit. They struggled to navigate the piles of corpses, their movements clumsy and ineffective. "Can somebody with a gun please put them down?" Edwin said. Hanson pointed to Parker and Thomas, and the two privates went to work. They moved forward carefully, picking their shots and dropping the remaining zombies with quick efficiency. As they did, Edwin and Kaylee walked over to Foster. The captain was clearly impressed with what he had seen, his expression showing respect. "I'll be honest, when I first saw you, I thought that Midnight Mike had lost his mind. But I'm pleased to say that I was wrong," Foster said. "I'm glad that we could exceed your expectations, Captain," Kaylee said. "So what now?" Edwin asked. Foster looked at the siblings, then at the barricade they had constructed, then back to the teenagers. A smile crossed his face. "Well, if you're going to be heading out to save people, you're going to need a place to take them. So, what do you say we go get you a stronghold?" Chapter 5. The trio of privates helped the civilians move the cars from the road over to in front of the house. The work was hard, requiring multiple people pushing each vehicle across the pavement and grass. Grunts of effort filled the air as shoulders pressed against trunks and hoods, feet digging in for traction. They positioned them in a semicircle around the front door, creating a bit of extra protection, while the soldiers went to secure the stronghold. The civilians worked alongside the military personnel, everyone contributing what they could. Sweat dripped down faces despite the cool air, the physical labor taking its toll. Muscles burned and hands ached from pushing the dead weight of the vehicles. As they worked outside, Edwin, Kaylee, Foster, and Hanson were huddled around the kitchen table inside the house. A cell phone sat in the middle of the table, on speaker, Midnight Mike's voice coming through. The four of them leaned in, listening carefully to what the radio host had to say. Foster had his notebook out, pen ready to write down whatever information Mike provided. "All right, Foster, I think I have a potential stronghold for you," Mike said. "Well, don't keep us in suspense, Mike," Foster said. "It's a supercenter grocery store that's about a mile from your location," Mike said. He trailed off, the pause concerning Foster. The captain's expression shifted, his eyes narrowing slightly as he tried to read the hesitation in Mike's voice. Hanson caught it too, straightening in his chair. "You don't sound too confident there, Mike," Foster said. "Well, the listener who called it in lives across the street. He thinks that it hasn't been looted. However," Mike said. He again trailed off, the repeated hesitation frustrating the captain. Foster's jaw tightened, his patience wearing thin. They didn't have time for drawn-out explanations. "Mike, just spit it out, man. We're on a bit of a time crunch here," Foster said. "Okay, the guy said that people tried to loot it on the first day, but their cars are still parked outside," Mike said. "So it's an occupied building? I'm not sure that's a headache we need right now," Foster said. "That's the thing, he thinks it's occupied, just not in the way you're thinking. The front doors are standing wide open," Mike said. Foster let out a sigh, knowing what that meant. Zombies, and lots of them. An open door in this new world was an invitation for the dead to wander inside, and a grocery store would have attracted plenty of attention in those first chaotic days. People would have rushed there looking for supplies, only to get overwhelmed by the creatures that followed them. "Are there any other options close by?" Hanson asked. "Yeah, I mean, there's a hardware store that's a few blocks down that seemed to still be locked up tight, but," Mike said. He trailed off and Kaylee picked it up, understanding where he was going. "But those aren't exactly known for their vast stock of food," Kaylee said. "Yeah," Mike said. Foster and Hanson looked at each other, a silent conversation passing between them. Then they turned to the teenagers, deferring to them, since this would be their stronghold to manage. The siblings would be the ones living there, the ones defending it. They deserved a say in the decision. "What do you want to do?" Foster asked. The siblings thought about it for a moment. Edwin and Kaylee exchanged glances, some unspoken communication passing between them. Kaylee nodded slightly, and Edwin's expression hardened with resolve. Then they looked back at Foster with confidence, their decision made. "Let's take the grocery store," Edwin said. "We're going to need food regardless of where we go, so if we're going to risk it, we might as well go for the gold," Kaylee said. The two soldiers let out a chuckle at the teenager's determination. Hanson shook his head, but couldn't hide the smile on his face. "These kids are going to be the death of me, Cap," Hanson said. "Don't act like you don't like them, Sarge," Foster said. Foster motioned for the siblings to follow, the group moving toward the door. They passed by the civilians who were walking toward the house, finished with their work on the cars. The vehicles from the road were now sitting in a semicircle around the front door, providing extra protection from any wandering threats. "I want everybody to get inside and stay out of sight. We have a lead on a new home for you, but we need to do some work first," Foster said. "There's plenty of food in the kitchen, so fix yourself whatever you like," Edwin said. "Just pack up whatever you don't use," Kaylee said. The civilians nodded as they went inside, grateful for the chance to rest and eat. The work of moving the cars had taken a lot out of them, and the promise of food was welcome. The group filed past the siblings and soldiers, heading for the kitchen and whatever supplies remained. "So, what's the play, Cap?" Parker asked. "Grocery store that's overrun with zombies," Foster said. Parker's head dropped, muttering curses under his breath. The private had been hoping for something easier, though he should have known better by now. Nothing came easy these days. The group made their way over to the party bus, their boots crunching on debris scattered across the pavement. As they piled in and took their seats, Hanson started it up and hit the gas. The engine rumbled to life, the familiar vibration running through the frame. They pushed through the streets, navigating around abandoned vehicles and the occasional wandering ghoul. The bus handled well despite its size, Hanson weaving around obstacles with practiced skill. The The siblings sat together near the middle of the bus, looking out the windows with wide eyes. The scale of everything was hitting them for the first time. They had spent the past weeks holed up in their neighborhood, fighting off the creatures that wandered too close. But this was different. This was seeing the full extent of the devastation that had swept through the city. Zombies swarmed buildings, pressing against doors and windows. Some buildings had dozens of creatures clustered around them, drawn by sounds or movement inside. There were no real signs of human life, outside of the occasional sign in the window begging for help. Messages written in marker or paint. Desperate pleas from people trapped inside. Some windows had sheets hung up with SOS or help scrawled across them in hasty lettering. "Do you think people are still alive in there?" Kaylee asked. Her voice was quiet, almost afraid of the answer. Edwin looked at the same windows she was seeing, his expression grim. "And if they are, how do we know?" Edwin asked. "Mike is putting a list together for you. People he's talked to, so no surprises," Foster said. The siblings went back to looking out the window as the world went by. They didn't want to focus on what they were being asked to do, the weight of responsibility that came with saving people. Every person they couldn't reach in time was another life lost. Rather, they tried their best to keep their heads in the moment, taking everything one step at a time. "Hey, Cap, we're getting close," Hanson called out. Foster walked up to the front of the bus, his hand gripping the overhead rail for balance as the vehicle bounced over debris. He looked out toward the Supercenter grocery store the next block up. The building was massive, easily taking up half the block with its sprawling footprint. The parking lot stretched out in front of it, mostly empty save for the vehicles near the entrance. There were a handful of cars parked out front, sitting exactly where they had been abandoned, along with about a dozen zombies scattered about near the entrance, shuffling aimlessly between the vehicles. A few of them bumped into car doors or wandered in circles, their movements random and purposeless. "Get to the edge of the parking lot and hold position," Foster said. Hanson nodded as Foster walked back to the siblings. The captain took in their body language, noticing the change from earlier. Rather than exuding confidence like they had in the neighborhood, both of them looked a little skittish. Their hands fidgeted with their weapons, checking magazines that they had already checked twice. They kept glancing at each other nervously, seeking reassurance. "Are you two okay?" Foster asked. "Yeah, we are. Just can't help but feel like we're in a bit over our heads," Edwin said. "Join the club. I wasn't exactly trained for this scenario," Foster said. The siblings let out a nervous chuckle, trying to break the tension, but ultimately failing. The joke didn't quite land, the reality of what they were about to do weighing too heavily on them. This was different from defending their street. This was going into unknown territory. "I tell you what, why don't you two follow us into the store? We'll do the heavy lifting, show you how it's done," Foster said. Both Edwin and Kaylee nodded thankfully to the captain. The relief on their faces was visible, their shoulders relaxing slightly. They fell into line behind him and the other soldiers, everyone gathering by the door. The formation was tight, each person knowing their role. Parker and Carver moved to the right side. Thomas positioned himself near Foster, and the siblings filled in the gaps. "All right, Hanson, get us up to the front. I want you to stay behind the wheel and keep watch. Thomas, Edwin, you're with me. Parker, Carver, Kaylee, take the right side of the store. Move fast and put down anything that moves," Foster said. The others nodded at the captain, checking their weapons one last time. Safeties clicked off, chambers were checked, and grips were adjusted. Foster smacked the sergeant on the shoulder, giving him the signal to move. Hanson hit the gas, picking up speed as they approached the front of the store. The party bus accelerated, engine roaring. He adjusted course, aiming for a cluster of zombies near the entrance. The bus bounced as it plowed through a handful of ghouls. Bodies tumbled under the reinforced bumper, bones cracking and flesh tearing. The impacts were solid, but the bus never slowed, clearing the way for them to exit. As soon as the door opened, Foster was the first man out. He raised his rifle and opened fire in one smooth motion. 2 shots rang out in quick succession, and he put down 2 creatures by the door. The first round punched through a zombie's forehead, dropping it instantly. The second caught another in the temple, spinning it around before it collapsed. The zombies dropped, their bodies creating a clear path inside the store's entrance. The teams moved swiftly, the soldiers taking the lead, with confidence born from experience. Their boots hit the pavement at a run, weapons up and ready. As soon as they cleared the vestibule, both teams opened fire. The soldiers cut down zombies on either side of the store, their rifles cracking in rapid succession. Foster's team moved left, Thomas and Edwin following his lead. The captain fired 3 rounds, each one finding a target. A zombie near the customer service desk went down, then another by the shopping carts, then a third that had been wandering near the produce section. The sound echoed off the high ceiling, amplified by the cavernous space. Spent brass casings tinkled as they hit the tile floor. Rather than fire their weapons, the siblings watched the soldiers work. They observed the teamwork, the way the men covered each other as they moved. Foster would advance 3 steps, clear a sector, then hold position. Thomas would move up to his right, covering a different angle, and Edwin followed his example. One would open fire, taking down several zombies before covering a corner. Then the other man would take point, advancing while his partner watched his back. It was a dance they had done countless times, every movement coordinated and efficient. No wasted motion, no hesitation. On the right side, Parker led the charge with Carver and Kaylee behind him. He fired in controlled bursts, dropping zombies near the pharmacy and down the first aisle. A creature in a tattered employee vest stumbled toward them, only to catch a round in the skull. Another emerged from between shelves, and Carver put it down before it could take 3 steps. The private moved with precision, each shot deliberate. Kaylee stayed close, her finger on the trigger, but holding fire as instructed. She watched how they communicated without words, how they covered angles and swept corners. There were only a couple dozen creatures inside the store, which posed little threat to the highly trained and well-armed soldiers. The ghouls had been wandering the aisles, drawn by the sound of the bus outside. Some had been trapped here since the first day. Others had wandered in through the open doors over the past weeks. Now they shuffled toward the gunfire, drawn by the noise. But they were cut down before they could close the distance, dropping one after another as the soldiers systematically cleared each section. Foster's team moved deeper into the store, sweeping down the left side. They passed the bakery section, the bread long since molded and spoiled. A zombie lurched out from behind a display, and Thomas put 2 rounds into its head without breaking stride. They continued forward, checking each aisle entrance as they passed. The deli counter had 3 creatures clustered around it, and Foster dropped all 3 in quick succession. His aim was perfect, each shot placed exactly where it needed to be. Parker's team mirrored their movements on the right, working their way toward the back. They cleared the pharmacy area, putting down a pair of zombies that had been trapped behind the counter. Carver kicked in the half door, checking the workspace beyond. Clear. They moved on, sweeping past shelves of medication and supplies. A zombie in hospital scrubs stumbled into view, and Parker ended it with a single shot. The creature's body hit the ground hard, sliding a few feet across the smooth floor. In a matter of minutes, the store was clear. The last zombie fell near the produce section, its body collapsing onto a display of long spoiled fruit. Rotted apples and oranges scattered across the floor, adding to the carnage. The soldiers maintained their positions for a moment longer, scanning for any movement. When none came, they lowered their weapons slightly, though they remained alert. The store was left with well-stocked shelves and a pile of corpses scattered throughout. Food lined the aisles, untouched since the outbreak began. Canned goods, dry pasta, rice, all of it sitting exactly where it had been placed. The center aisles held chips and snacks. The end caps displayed cereal boxes. It was a treasure trove in this new world, enough supplies to feed dozens of people for months. "Parker, tell Hanson to park in the back of the store, then get that front door secure," Foster said. The private nodded and ran off, his boots echoing on the tile floor. He disappeared through the vestibule, heading back to relay the orders. The bus engine could be heard outside, rumbling as it moved around to the rear of the building. The others stood near the front registers, taking in the space they had just secured. Edwin and Kaylee looked around in amazement, seeing row after row of supplies. "That was an impressive display, Captain," Kaylee said. "You see how easy it is?" Foster asked. "Yeah, now we just need some reliable people to team up with," Edwin said. "We're almost to that. First, we need to get this place fortified." Chapter 6. Foster pulled up an area map on the tablet device taken from the party bus, his fingers swiping across the screen to zoom in on their location. He looked at it intently for a moment, studying the surrounding streets and buildings. Then, he set it onto the checkout counter with a decisive tap. Everybody else was surrounding it, leaning in to get a better view as he spoke. The counter space gave them plenty of room to spread out and see the details. "Okay, there's a car dealership 2 blocks down. We need to start pulling cars into the lot to get the outer perimeter set up," Foster said. He pointed to the location on the map, showing them the route they would take. The dealership sat on a corner lot, which would make access easier. "I can take point on that, Cap," Parker said. "Take Carver and Thomas with you," Foster said. "I'll go with them too," Edwin said. The teenager stepped forward, clearly wanting to contribute. Foster looked at him for a moment, considering, then nodded his approval. "That works. Get the lay of the land while we get things set up here," Foster said. "Do you want me out there with them?" Kaylee asked. She looked ready to grab her rifle and head out, but Foster shook his head. "No, I want you here with us. We have a few things to go over," Foster said. Kaylee nodded before looking over to her brother. The two of them had a silent moment, something unspoken passing between them. It was the look of siblings who had been through hell together and weren't quite ready to split up. Parker picked up on it, the concern evident on Kaylee's face. He stepped over and smacked Edwin on the arm, trying to get him back into the moment. "Don't worry, Kaylee, I'll take good care of him," Parker said. She let out a smile as the 3 privates and Edwin made their way to the front door of the store. Their boots echoed on the tile as they crossed the checkout area and moved toward the entrance. Half a dozen zombies had shambled over to their position while they had been inside. The creatures were scattered around the parking lot within 15 yards of the entrance, wandering aimlessly between the abandoned cars. Some bumped into vehicles, others just stood swaying in place. "Thomas, Carver, take them down quietly," Parker said. The other 2 privates nodded as Parker unlocked the doors and pulled them open. The glass doors swung outward with a soft squeak of hinges. In a flash, Carver and Thomas moved into the lot, drawing their knives and going on the offensive. The blades caught the light as they moved, both soldiers advancing with purpose. As they worked, Parker and Edwin walked and talked. The private kept his voice low, aware that too much noise would draw more attention than they needed. "You're doing good out here, kid. Your sister too," Parker said. "Our parents raised us to be self-sufficient. I just wish we didn't have to be that way just yet," Edwin said. His voice carried a weight that came from recent loss. Parker understood that feeling all too well. Most people out here had lost someone. "Your parents did a hell of a job. They'd be proud of what you've done so far, and even more proud of what you're going to do," Parker said. Edwin fought back his emotions before snapping back into the moment. He blinked a few times, pushing down the feelings that threatened to surface. There would be time to grieve later. "So, how bad is it out there? I've heard Mike talk about it with people who called in, but it's hard to tell what's being embellished," Edwin said. Parker thought about his words carefully before speaking. He didn't want to sugarcoat the situation, but he also didn't want to overwhelm the kid. "Don't get me wrong, it's dangerous as hell out here, but it's not as bad as it could be. We're in a good spot for sure," Parker said. "You just handed 2 teenagers a bag of guns and are about to turn us loose on the city. So I'm not sure it's all rainbows and unicorns," Edwin said. Parker let out a laugh, nodding in agreement. The kid had a point. The fact that they were arming teenagers spoke volumes about how desperate the situation had become. "Yeah, I can't argue with that," Parker said. Before they could continue, Carver and Thomas walked back over to them. Both men were wiping their blades clean on rags pulled from their pockets. They sheathed their knives and looked ahead across the parking lot, scanning for threats. The immediate area was clear of zombies now, the bodies of the 6 they had just eliminated lying still on the pavement. The closest creatures were half a block up in the middle of the road, a dozen of them tightly packed together in a cluster. "We're clear for now, Parker," Thomas said. "But we're going to have to break that pack up if we're going hand to hand," Carver said. "We'll be fine. Should be far enough away from the lot to go weapons hot by the time we get there," Parker said. The soldiers nodded, everybody checking their weapons as they picked up the pace. They began jogging, getting out into the street and up to the next intersection. The pavement was cracked in places, debris scattered across the road. They paused in the middle of the intersection, taking a moment to assess their surroundings. They looked down the cross street, seeing a smattering of ghouls in either direction. The creatures were spread out pretty thin, no concentrated groups that would pose a real problem. Some wandered near storefronts, others stood motionless in the middle of the road. "Okay, we light them up, then haul ass to the dealership. Unless the lot is swarming with them, we push on into the building," Parker said. "We'll follow your lead, Parker," Carver said. The private nodded as he raised his rifle, prompting everybody else to do the same. Edwin brought his weapon up, checking his sights. Parker led them forward, getting within 5 yards of the grouping of zombies before firing off the first shot. The crack of the rifle echoed off the surrounding buildings. As soon as the bullet left his weapon, the others opened fire. It was a slaughter, 20 bullets flying in seconds. Each shot found its mark, the soldiers' training evident in their accuracy. The dozen creatures in the middle of the road went down in quick succession, bodies dropping and piling on top of each other. Within moments, the cluster was eliminated, leaving nothing but corpses and spent brass casings. "Come on, let's move!" Parker called out. He kept the group moving quickly down the road, not giving them time to catch their breath. The noise of their gunshots was already drawing the attention of more zombies down the street. The creatures began to emerge from the parking lots and from around the back of the stores, shambling toward the sound of gunfire. The group mostly ignored them, pushing on to the car dealership on the next corner. They maintained their pace, keeping enough distance from the zombies that they didn't need to waste ammunition. The dealership came into view, its large sign still illuminated from the night the apocalypse had begun. The lot was filled with vehicles, ranging from compact sedans all the way up to fully loaded oversized SUVs. The inventory sat exactly as it had been positioned before the world ended, arranged in neat rows designed to showcase the merchandise. There were a smattering of zombies roaming the aisles between vehicles. The creatures appeared to be lost in the maze of steel, wandering in circles and bumping into car doors. "Just ignore them and get to the showroom," Parker called out. The group moved through the tightly packed vehicles, weaving between sedans and trucks. They kept a close eye on the creatures as they moved, tracking each one to make sure none got close enough to be a threat. The zombies noticed them, heads turning and bodies shuffling in their direction, but none got close enough to warrant a shot. The spacing between the vehicles worked in their favor, creating natural barriers that slowed the ghouls down. A moment later, Parker reached the front set of glass doors. The showroom entrance was pristine despite everything, the glass still intact and clean. He pulled on the handle, surprised when it opened up easily. The door swung outward without resistance. "Carver, Thomas, sweep the room and secure any door you find," Parker said. The two men nodded, moving in quickly as Parker pulled the door open wider. He held it while they entered, then followed them inside, with Edwin close behind. While Carver and Thomas swept the large showroom, their rifles up and scanning for threats, Parker led Edwin to the back offices. They could hear the occasional pop of gunfire as the other two privates cleared the space, putting down whatever creatures they found. Both men had their weapons at the ready as they moved through the showroom. The space was large and open, with several vehicles on display platforms. Desks sat empty, computers dark and lifeless. They came around the corner, leading to the hallway to the offices, and Parker immediately spotted movement. 4 creatures shambled about in the narrow hallway. All of them were badly injured, multiple bites covering their bodies. Some of the wounds were affecting their ability to walk, causing them to lurch and drag their legs. One had a massive chunk missing from its shoulder, the bone visible through the torn flesh. Another was missing most of its left arm, the limb ending in a ragged stump. Without either of them speaking a word, both men picked their targets. Parker aimed at the 2 on the left. Edwin took the 2 on the right. They squeezed their triggers nearly simultaneously, the rifles cracking in the enclosed space. The sound was deafening in the hallway, echoing off the walls. The 4 zombies dropped unceremoniously, their bodies hitting the carpet with dull thuds. They held their position in the hallway for a moment, making sure they were in the clear. Parker scanned for any additional movement, his rifle sweeping across the doorways that lined both sides of the corridor. When nothing else appeared, he nodded to Edwin and they began moving forward. At the far end of the hall was a large metal box affixed to the wall. Parker looked at it for a moment, studying the lock mechanism. It was a standard key cabinet, the kind used to organize inventory in any car dealership. He used the butt of his rifle to crack it open, striking the lock repeatedly. It took a few strikes, metal clanging against metal, but he managed to free it from the lock. The door swung open with a satisfying click. Inside sat a couple hundred sets of keys, all of which were numbered and organized on hooks. Each set had a tag attached, presumably matching the vehicle's stock number. "Bingo," Parker said. "So what ride are we taking first?" Edwin asked. The teenager looked at the keys with something close to excitement. Under different circumstances, Being turned loose in a car dealership would have been fun. We're going to need about 40 sedans to get you a solid barricade around the parking lot, Parker said. Edwin's expression shifted as he did the math in his head. 40 cars meant a lot of driving back and forth. I'm glad I ran cross-country in high school, Edwin said. Parker let out a laugh as he grabbed the keys for an SUV from one of the hooks. Cardio is important, but since we're stealing all of the vehicles, I think we can spare one to ferry us back and forth, Parker said. Edwin let out a chuckle, shocked that he wasn't able to figure that out for himself. The stress of the situation was clearly affecting his thinking. Parker looked at a map that was on the inside lid of the key box. It showed the layout of the lot, with sections labeled and organized. He scanned it for a moment, his eyes moving across the diagram. Then he got excited, a grin spreading across his face. "Oh, hell yeah, you're definitely playing this on easy mode, kid," Parker said. "What are you talking about?" Edwin asked. "This dealership has their own private gas pump in the back by the maintenance bay, so you won't have to deal with having to break into gas stations to turn the pumps on," Parker said. He pointed to the symbol on the map, showing the fuel station's location. It was a huge advantage, one less complication in an already complicated situation. "Are we really going to be burning that much gas?" Edwin asked. "I've seen the list of people Mike has for you to rescue. Those big-ass trucks eat up fuel, so yeah, if you're doing your job, you're going to be refueling often," Parker said. Edwin contemplated that for a moment, processing what it meant. Before he could respond, he was startled by rapid footsteps coming down the hall. He spun around, rifle coming up instinctively. Then he relaxed when he saw it was Carver and Thomas approaching at a jog. "We're clear, Parker," Carver said. "One of the maintenance bay doors are open, and a few of those things are inside, but nothing too bad," Thomas said. He gestured back toward the service area with his thumb. "The interior door is locked up tight, though," Thomas added. Parker nodded before reaching into the key box and grabbing a few sets. He sorted through them quickly, finding what he needed. Then he tossed the car keys out to the others, each man catching them reflexively. "Get your motors running, boys, because we have a lot of trips to make." Chapter 7. An hour later, Parker, Thomas, Carver, and Edwin drove the last batch of cars down the street toward the grocery store. The convoy moved slowly, the drivers careful to avoid the handful of creatures wandering about. Hansen stood on top of the makeshift barricade they had been constructing, waving them into position with broad gestures. His directions were clear even from a distance, pointing to the specific gaps that needed to be filled. As they got the final cars in place, the barricade took shape. The vehicles formed a protective barrier around the front of the grocery store, creating a defensible perimeter. The drivers cut their engines and climbed out, surveying their work with satisfaction. On the opposite side of the barricade, Foster and Kaylee were on top of a sedan. Each of them held makeshift spears made from broom handles with screwdrivers secured to the end. The weapons looked crude but functional, the screwdrivers bound tightly with duct tape and wire. The duo waited on a few zombies to shamble over to them, the creatures drawn by the sound of the arriving vehicles. "I know these don't look like much, but they're incredibly effective," Foster said. He held up his spear, showing Kaylee the proper grip and stance. Kaylee nodded, watching the first zombie approach. She waited for it to get into striking distance, her muscles tensing in preparation. As it reached up toward her position on the car, she thrust her spear forward. The tip caught the zombie in the eye socket, punching right through into the brain. The creature dropped without a sound, collapsing onto the pavement. Foster stepped up next, driving the tip of the screwdriver through the forehead of the next zombie. It took a little more power, the bone offering more resistance than the eye socket. But it worked just the same, the zombie falling away from the car. "Give the forehead a shot. Make sure you put as much into it as you can," Foster said. Kaylee took a deep breath, steadying herself before doing as instructed. She planted her feet firmly on the hood of the sedan, getting her weight behind the strike. She let out a grunt as she thrust the spear forward, putting her full strength into it. The tip of the screwdriver penetrated the skull just enough to reach the brain, ending the threat. The zombie's body went limp and slid off the hood. "I'm glad that worked, but I'd really like to find something a little stronger," Kaylee said. Her arms were already feeling the strain from the effort required. The makeshift spear got the job done, but it wasn't ideal. "There's plenty of stuff out there," Foster said. He gestured vaguely toward the city around them, indicating the countless homes and businesses they could scavenge from. When you start rescuing people, I'd suggest telling them to grab knives, baseball bats, anything that might be useful, Foster said. Kaylee nodded in agreement as they hopped down from the barricade. They walked over to the other side, where the others had finished securing the last of the vehicles. The cars started 20 feet away from the door on either side of the building, moving halfway across the parking lot before connecting in the middle. It wasn't a huge area, but it did give them plenty of space to move about. "How are we looking, boys?" Foster asked. He surveyed the barricade with a critical eye, checking for gaps or weak points that might need reinforcement. "It isn't perfect, but I think we're off to a solid start," Parker said. "What about some transports?" Foster asked. "We have 3 SUVs gassed up and ready to go at the loading dock," Carver said. Foster pulled out his phone, looking at a recent text message from Mike. The screen showed an address of a nearby apartment complex, along with a note about survivors waiting for extraction. He held it up for the others to see, angling it so they could read the information. "Well, why don't you take them out on a run while I call Mike and figure out where we're headed next?" Foster said. Carver and Parker nodded, motioning for the siblings to follow them. The 4 of them moved through the store quickly, their boots echoing on the tile floor. They weaved between aisles and displays, getting to the loading docks at the back. The area was designed for deliveries, with 3 bay doors and a concrete platform. Parker grabbed the chain next to one of the bay doors, pulling it down hand over hand. The door rolled up with a clatter of metal, revealing the 3 SUVs sitting right in front of it. All 3 vehicles were large and sturdy, perfect for navigating streets filled with debris and the occasional zombie. "Things are clear now, but I'd suggest leaving the sunroofs open. It makes getting in and out easy when you have a crowd," Parker said. He hopped down onto the ground from the loading dock, the drop about 3 feet. He motioned for the others to follow, demonstrating how easy the exit was. "Carver, follow behind us," Parker said. Carver nodded, getting into one of the SUVs as the 3 others piled into another. Parker sat shotgun, adjusting the seat to give himself more room. The siblings had a silent debate about who would drive, both of them hesitating at the driver's side door. After a long pause and some pointed looks, Kaylee got behind the wheel. "Okay, where am I going?" Kaylee asked. She adjusted the mirrors and familiarized herself with the controls, her hands gripping the steering wheel. Parker pulled out his phone, looking at a text message from Foster with the address. He punched it up on the GPS, and the device began chirping directions in its artificial voice. "Just follow the friendly voice," Parker said. Kaylee nodded, doing as instructed. She pulled out from behind the store and got onto the main road, the SUV handling smoothly. She drove several blocks, taking great care to avoid the zombies that were staggering out into her path. Some of the creatures reached toward the vehicle as it passed, their hands scraping against the sides, but the SUV was heavy enough that they couldn't stop it or slow it down. It took a few minutes of driving before they got close enough to the address to see what they were dealing with. The GPS announced they were approaching their destination, and Kaylee slowed down. There was one small apartment building, with a decent-sized parking lot filled with cars. The vehicles looked untouched from the night everything went to hell, sitting in their parking spaces with windows intact. A few dozen zombies shambled about the lot, wandering between the rows of cars. Kaylee stopped half a block down, getting a read on the situation. She put the SUV in park and leaned forward, studying the layout. "What do you think, Edwin?" Kaylee asked. Her brother leaned forward, poking his head into the front seat so that he could get a better view. He studied it for a moment, his eyes tracking the movement of the zombies and noting the layout of the parking lot. Then he looked in the rear of the vehicle, taking note of the melee weapons back there. There was a collection of bats and makeshift spears, similar to the one Kaylee had used earlier at the grocery store. "Motion for Carver to pull up beside us," Edwin said. Kaylee nodded, rolling down her window and waving Carver around. The private's SUV pulled forward and parked right beside them. He rolled down his window, looking over at them expectantly. "What's up?" Carver asked. "I want you to go to the far side driveway, pull in, and drive down the middle aisle," Edwin said. He pointed to the entrance on the opposite side of the lot, mapping out the plan as he spoke. "Get a third of the way down and block the road. We're going to do the same coming from the other direction, give ourselves a little fortification to work with," Edwin said. Carver looked over to Parker, seeking approval. The private nodded in agreement with the plan, recognizing the tactical soundness of it. "All right, I'm game," Carver said. "Let's get it done then," Edwin said. The two SUVs picked up speed, moving toward their respective entrances. They separated, each heading to opposite ends of the parking lot. They pulled into the lot at the same time, and zombies immediately took notice. The creatures smacked off the front and sides of the vehicles as they drove through, bodies bouncing off the reinforced frames. The impacts were solid, but the SUVs never slowed, pushing through the crowd. They both made their turns down the center aisle, tires squealing slightly as they maneuvered. Getting into position, they stopped about a third of the way down and turned the vehicles perpendicular to the road. The SUVs sat across the aisle, effectively blocking it off. The gap between the two vehicles was only about 15 feet, creating room for them to work. All four of them quickly got out of the SUVs. The siblings grabbed spears from the back before getting into position. The soldiers took up positions on either side of the fortifications, their rifles at the ready. They stood back from the barricade, covering the flanks and watching for threats. "There's still some gap between the cars, so we'll watch for stragglers," Parker said. The siblings nodded to the private before they each took a side of the barricade. They jumped up on the hoods of parked cars, using the elevation to give themselves better reach and visibility. They readied their weapons, spears held at the ready. As the zombies in the lot slowly shambled over to them, drawn by the noise of the engines and the presence of living people, they were met with the business end of a spear. The work was slow and methodical. A zombie staggered into range, and either Edwin or Kaylee would strike, destroying its brain. The creature would fall, and another would step up to take its place. The siblings worked in rhythm, each handling their side of the barricade. Kaylee struck a zombie in the temple, the screwdriver punching through. Edwin caught one in the eye socket, dropping it just the same. The danger level was minimal, especially with the soldiers occasionally popping off a volley of rounds to clear the packs of ghouls that got too close. Parker's rifle cracked twice, dropping two zombies that were trying to circle around the barricade. Carver took out three more that had clustered together near one of the parked cars. 15 minutes after the assault had begun, the parking lot fell silent. The last zombie dropped under Edwin's spear, and suddenly there was nothing left moving except them. They looked back to the road, seeing a handful of zombies slowly coming their way. But they were still a couple blocks up, moving at their typical shambling pace. No immediate threat. Kaylee let out a two-finger whistle, the sharp sound cutting through the air. She aimed it in the direction of the lone apartment building, trying to get the attention of anyone inside. She could see a handful of survivors in the windows, their faces pressed against the glass as they looked out at the cleared parking lot. Once they saw that the coast was relatively clear and that help had arrived, they opened their doors. People began emerging from their apartments, cautious but hopeful. "We're going to get you someplace safe, but you're going to have to move fast. Grab every bit of food that you can and everything that could be used as a weapon. Kitchen knives, baseball bats, anything like that. You have 3 minutes, now move," Kaylee called out. She spoke with enough conviction to get the people moving, her voice carrying authority despite her age. The survivors nodded and vanished inside their apartments to do as instructed. They scattered back through their doorways, understanding the urgency. As they worked, Kaylee jumped down from her perch. She joined her brother over at the soldiers, who were keeping watch on the approaching zombies down the street. "Not bad for a couple of kids, huh, Parker?" Edwin asked. He couldn't keep the pride out of his voice. They had executed the plan perfectly, and everyone had made it through without injury. "Not bad at all. I'm glad you're feeling comfortable with this, because you're gonna have to do about 50 more runs like this, only without us backing you up," Parker said. The reality of that statement hung in the air for a moment. This was just the beginning. "Where are you off to?" Kaylee asked. "There's hundreds of people just like you out there, ready and capable of helping, but they just need a hand up and a care package, and that's exactly what we're going to give them." Chapter 8. 2 days later. Private Parker staggered through the aisles of a supercenter, his mind barely functional as exhaustion completely overwhelmed him. His feet dragged with each step, and his eyes felt heavy enough to close on their own. The fluorescent lights overhead seemed too bright, making his head ache. He got to the end of the row, looking over and spotting a camping display. A tent sat fully assembled on a platform, and beside it was a sleeping bag spread out invitingly. He stared at it for a long beat, his mind envisioning himself curling up inside the warm sleeping bag. The image was so vivid, he could almost feel the soft fabric against his skin. He closed his eyes, making the vision all the more real. The idea of just collapsing right there and sleeping for 12 hours straight was almost overwhelming. But he was knocked out of his fantasy as Sergeant Hansen clapped him on the shoulder, the impact nearly making him stumble. "We're almost there, Parker," Hansen said. But it's right there, Sarge," Parker said. His voice came out as almost a whine, the exhaustion stripping away any pretense of military bearing. Hansen smirked as he held up a six-pack of beer, pressing the cardboard against Parker's skin to show him just how cold it was. The chill cut through his shirt, and the promise of that cold beer suddenly seemed more appealing than sleep. "Yeah, you make a good argument," Parker said. "We're not going to have too many more moments like this, so let's savor it," Hansen said. Parker nodded as the two of them walked to the back of the building. His steps had a bit more energy now, motivated by the promise of cold beer and hot food. Inside the loading dock area, there were a dozen people lounging about in picnic chairs that were set up around a charcoal grill. The setup looked surreal, a backyard barbecue in the middle of a zombie apocalypse. A civilian in a festive apron that read "Grill Master" was busy cracking open cans of meat, tossing them onto the grill. The man looked to be in his 40s, and he worked with the focused attention of someone who took his grilling seriously. The sizzle matched the scent that reached Parker's nostrils, seeming to reinvigorate him. The smell of cooking meat made his stomach growl, reminding him that he couldn't remember the last time he'd eaten a proper meal. The last few days had been a blur of protein bars and bottled water consumed on the move. "Yeah, that's smelling good," Parker said. He watched as the grill master flipped the meat with practiced precision, the flames licking up around the edges of the patties. Smoke rose in thin wisps, carrying that distinctive charcoal flavor that no gas grill could quite replicate. He reached down, grabbing onto one of the beers as Hansen offered it up. The bottle was ice cold in his hand, condensation already forming on the glass. The two of them walked over and found their seats near Carver, Thomas, and Foster. The soldiers were listening intently to a young woman who was speaking. She was in her mid-20s, dressed in casual clothes that had seen better days. "Sorry if we're interrupting," Hansen said. "No worries. I was just telling your friends here about how I had been trapped inside my house for 3 solid weeks, Julie said. "That must have been horrible," Parker said. He cracked open his beer and took a long pull, the cold liquid washing down his throat. It tasted better than any beer he'd ever had. "Are you kidding me? I worked on the Strip, 2 jobs at 2 different casinos. I was lucky if I saw my house 8 hours a day, and most of that was sleeping. I just hate that it took the end of the world for me to get some downtime," Julie said. Parker let out a deep sigh before taking another swig of his beer and talking. "Downtime. I almost forgot what that was like," Parker said. "Don't worry, Parker. We're taking a day after this," Foster said. The captain spoke with conviction, as if saying it out loud would make it actually happen. They all knew how quickly plans could change. "How long have you been out here saving people like us?" Julie asked. Hansen looked down at his watch before going into thinking mode, his brow furrowed as he did the mental math, counting back through the hours and operations. It took him a few moments before he responded. "Nearly 60 hours straight if my math is correct," Hansen said. "Maybe an hour here and there where we could catch some sleep," Thomas said. "It was more of a power blackout than sleep," Carver said. His description was accurate. They had grabbed sleep in 15 or 20-minute increments, usually in the back of a vehicle between missions. Real rest had been impossible. "That takes me back to my college days. I may have partied a little too much on the weekends, and during the week, and during class," Julie said. She trailed off, the rest of the group breaking into laughter. The sound felt good, a release of tension that had been building for days. Even in their exhausted state, they could appreciate the humor. "Even though my body hates me for it, I know we did some good though," Parker said. "This is what, Group 7 that we set up?" Carver asked. "I think we're on 8, Hansen said. "That's a lot of people. But if you don't mind me asking, why haven't you been doing this all along?" Julie asked. She looked around at the soldiers, genuine curiosity on her face. It was a fair question. "I mean, I was lucky that I had enough food to last this long, but I can't imagine a lot of people out there were in that position," Julie said. The soldiers fell silent for a moment before looking over to Foster. The question required a command-level answer, not something the privates or even Hansen should field. The captain took a drink of his beer before speaking, matter-of-factly. The reality is that it wasn't really possible until recently. Outside of the outskirts of the city, especially in the south, the concentration of those things in the streets was too thick for us to push through. But we've been working hard on luring them out of town, which made operations like this possible, Foster said. In fact, you're lucky Parker here made his final run before joining us, because if he hadn't, there would have been too many of those things around for us to get to you, Hansen said. Julie thought about it for a moment, her mind replaying the scenes of the zombies outside of her home, thinning over the past few days. She had noticed the decrease in numbers, but hadn't understood why. She looked over to Parker, giving him a thankful nod. In response to the gesture, the private raised his beer in a toast. Julie lifted her own drink, and they clinked bottles together. So, what about the people closer to the middle of the city, or on the strip? Julie asked. The soldiers fell silent again for a few moments. The question hung in the air, uncomfortable and unavoidable. Carver shifted in his seat before speaking up. Hopefully they have as much food in their cupboards as you did, Carver said. He trailed off, not wanting to finish his thought, and not needing to, as everybody understood the implications. The people deeper in the city, where the zombie concentration remained heavy, weren't getting help anytime soon. They were on their own, and their chances weren't good. As the uncomfortable silence continued, it was broken by the sound of Foster's phone ringing. The sudden noise made everyone jump slightly. Then they all let out a sigh of relief. They laughed a bit at their own reaction as the captain pulled out his phone and answered. "This is Foster," Foster said. "Hey, Captain, just touching base," Mike said. His voice came through clearly despite the speaker being held against Foster's ear. "We're looking good over here, Mike. Got the last group into the supercenter. Just waiting on dinner to finish up on the grill," Foster said. "That's excellent news. If you have a moment, I have someone who really wants to talk to you," Mike said. "Yeah, give me just a second," Foster said. Foster got up from his seat, getting a concerned look from Hansen that was met with a dismissive hand gesture. The captain was trying to let him know it was nothing to worry about, just needed some quiet. He walked to the other side of the storeroom, getting some distance from the group and the noise of the grill. He leaned against a stack of pallets, settling in for the conversation. "All right, Mike, what do you have for me?" Foster asked. "Give me a second and I'll patch him in," Mike said. Foster could hear Mike hitting a few buttons, the electronic beeps carrying through the phone. A moment later, another voice joined the call, coming through with a slight echo that suggested a conference setup. "All right, Kyle, you're on with Captain Foster," Mike said. "Captain, it's good to finally talk to you. My name is Kyle, and we could really use your help," Kyle said. His voice was steady and confident, the tone of someone used to being in charge. Foster straightened up slightly, his tired mind shifting into professional mode. "I can't promise anything, but I'll do my best." "Where are you at?" Foster asked. "We are at the Desert Oasis Casino, just off the strip," Kyle said. Foster went silent for a moment, his tired mind struggling to process the information. The strip was still heavily infested, the zombie concentration there among the highest in the city. Getting anywhere near it was borderline suicidal. "I have no doubt that Mike has been hyping us up and what we're out here doing, but I don't think we can get anywhere close to the strip," Foster said. "Correct me if I'm wrong, Captain, but don't you have a helicopter?" Kyle asked. "We do, but we don't have the resources to take a casino hotel," Foster said. The implication was clear. Even if they could land on the roof, clearing a building that size would require an army. They were stretched thin as it was. "Well, lucky for you, we've already done that. We control every floor, and the only zombies still left in the building are locked up tight in their rooms," Kyle said. Foster paused for a moment, processing the information. "Okay, Kyle, I'm a little confused. If you've already secured the hotel, then what do you need from me?" Foster asked. "We're safe, but we can see people across the street who aren't. We can see their signs for help in the windows, but we don't have a way across the street. If we can get inside, my people know how to deal with those things," Kyle said. His voice carried a frustration that Foster understood well. Being able to see people who needed help, but being unable to reach them, was its own kind of torture. "So, you just need a crossing guard?" Foster asked. "In a manner of speaking," Kyle said. Foster thought about it for a moment, his mind running through the logistics. With a sigh, he made the decision. "My team has been going for 60 hours straight, so we're going to need some downtime. But we will be over to you tomorrow," Foster said. "Thank you, Captain. We'll be ready to move when you get here," Kyle said. "I'll call when we're on the way," Foster said. "Go get some rest, Captain. I'll have the legwork done by the time you get up," Mike said. "Copy that, Mike," Foster said. Foster clicked off the phone, pocketing it. He stood there for a moment, looking over to his men. They were laughing at something Julie had said, relaxed for the first time in days. He took another drink of his beer and let out a sigh. The work is never done. The end.